And so if your income is going down in this market, that's a big question. Why? What do you need to do different? And maybe one of the things that you need to do different is stop doing different.
Okay, why do we want to make fundraising exciting? Why shouldn't fundraising be boring? Why shouldn't it be really, really, really boring? Why shouldn't we look back at what worked 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and look at how we can make it relevant to today?
Do we want to generate more money? Do we want to engage more people? Do we want to actively change society? Or do we want to do fun things that are going to impress our mates?
We should be looking at experience and insight and wisdom. Who is responsible for that? Because it's not the poor individual fundraiser that they're doing their best, but they're not responsible for sharing best practice.
And we say, when it comes to innovation, it's why will it work rather than why not give it a go. This is the point that, we'll learn by failing. Sometimes you don't need to learn by failing. Sometimes you can learn by thinking and reading and researching.
Where do people get all that stuff we created at the convention originally? Where do people get
it's all
best practice?
Out of date, Giles. We don't want that old rubbish now. Well, episode 3. So we've kept our promise, and it's lovely to see you again, dear viewer. And I'm here with Giles Pegram, my co-conspirator.
Hi there.
And we didn't know what we were going to talk about today. I wanted to discuss the agency-client relationship. Obviously, I've been a client as well as run an agency, and Giles worked with one particular agency for about 30 years. And we've decided to push that a little further down the road, because today Giles wants to talk about how do fundraisers learn? Where do we get our information from? And so, Giles, over to you.
Well, thank you, Mark.
You're very welcome.
Hello, viewer. I was at a group session with Matthew Sherrington some time back, and he was saying, where do people go to learn the basics? And we discussed it, and we didn't know. So if you take organisational knowledge, what we have now is 20 years ago, people would stay in charities for quite a bit of time. They'd build up organisational knowledge within those charities would build up organisational knowledge. Now people leave the sector much quicker, there's much higher turnover. So where does the organisational knowledge get captured? I've got a story I want to tell later, but start with that one. Where do we keep organisational knowledge?
I don't know. At the moment, having been around for as long as we have, I will sometimes we'll go back to a client that we've worked with before, and we'll talk about something that they maybe did 5 years previously and said, well, this worked then, and the organisation will have no idea about that. Everyone will have gone and moved on. So I think this very little sense of wanting to retain information. Of course, it's not every agency, every charity. There will some that will have, fantastic archives. But you and I will both know the guard book, where every time you did an appeal or every time you put an ad out, you would keep one copy, and there would be a physical copy that would go into into a book, so you could go back and look. Because obviously, when you're doing data analysis, you can't analyse data on its own. You have to look at what packs and what information, where people came from, what were the recruitment devices that brought them on board, and that seems to get lost now. I did a review a few last year for a very large charity, and I analysed 3 years worth of their data and 3 years worth of their fundraising materials, and it must have taken me pretty much a month to do that, gather that information in, and it was all from various artwork files, and it was data here, data there. And so it was a huge job to do. And there's not many times, I think, that organisations actually stop and say, well, let's look back 3, 4, 5 years and let's do a complete review and see what we can learn from that. It's normally so much what's happening next. Where do we go? What's the new innovation out there that we want to copy or we want to adopt to, try and keep ahead?
Is there a sense in which we've become so focused on innovation that we've lost sight of experience, wisdom, insight, best practice? Because, the world has changed, the world has moved on, what happened 20 years ago is not relevant today because we're now into a new world, new technology, etc., ice bucket challenges. We need to focus on the future and not focus on the past. Is there? I detect that, but is it real?
Yeah, I think it's real, and I think, don't forget, ice bucket challenges, Giles, were about 12 years ago. I think they were. So
people still talk about them.
Oh, of course. And at one point, every time you spoke to somebody, it was like, we'd like an ice bucket challenge. And my answer was, yes, I'm sure you would. Wouldn't we all? But it's things like that rarely come along. And when they do come along, they tend not to fit any logical model either. It's, it's something that's completely left field. But yeah, I find that innovation, as a shiny ball, is incredibly disruptive to the sector, and people like to be disruptive and shake things up and see what happens. But and again, we have to remember, who are we disrupting? In the UK broadly, when we're talking about the broad mass of donors, which tend to be older people, conservative, small c, hopefully, with the election coming up, not big C, and they've reached possibly a point in their life when they want things that they can depend on, when there is a sense that what is good is being continued rather than being constantly thrown away. And so innovation, which is often for younger people, and it's one of the points that I talk about, we discussed last time on our session, in effect, what do we want? Do we want to generate more money? Do we want to engage more people? Do we want to actively change society, or do we want to do fun things that are going to impress our mates? And I think there's possibly a little bit too much of the latter around in the moment, because there's some ideas I see, and from the get-go, well, that is not going to work.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You just said innovation is disruptive to the sector. And you were saying that in a kind of pejorative way.
Yes, in a bad way.
But look at Liz Truss, the famous Prime Minister Liz Truss. She claimed that she was the disruptor-in-chief. I remember thinking, no, the Prime Minister should not be the disruptor-in-chief. Disruptors are right, Amazon, Apple, all came about because of disruptors. But disruption is not what the core of fundraising is about. Look, I'm going to tell a story. Spoiler alert, it's going to seem like boasting. Spoiler, it is boasting a bit.
Perish the thought that you're boasting, Giles.
But let me tell you the story, and you tell me, am I talking absolute rubbish, or is there some sense here? I was the third chair of what is now the Chartered Institute of Fundraising.
Who was the first?
George Medley.
Oh, good. A name I've never heard. But carry on.
And we founded the convention. And we decided that there was so much to cover that we should have a 3-day residential convention, and that we should have one venue with all the sessions, all the speaking in the same building. And so we picked the Birmingham Conference Centre. And then Stephen Lee, who was the director, and I, we took ourselves away in a room for a day. And we spent the first half day saying, OK, what do we want to cover? And I think we invented the concept of tracks. I checked with ChatGPT yesterday, and it says it happened after us. So we developed 5 tracks. And then within each track, we just covered every single element of fundraising, every income stream, everything to do with large charities, small charities, local charities, national charities, all the methods that we used to communicate with different types of donor. We wanted to cover everything. And we divide the sessions that we needed. In some cases, we would have basic, intermediate, and advanced. In some cases, it was relevant to everybody. And so we spent the whole morning doing this. And at the end of the morning, we sat back and we looked at what we'd done and said, have we covered everything? And we thought we had. So we had a sandwich, then came back in the afternoon and said, okay, who is the very best person to talk on that topic that we've identified? And we would identify the very best person. And without exception, every single one accepted. And so what you had on the day was that people would spend a day listening to great content. If you went out of the hotel in the evening, all there was car parks. So nowhere to go. Everyone stayed in the bar, the pubs, whatever, and they would talk about what they'd heard during the day, and they'd exchange ideas and gossip and whatever, and then they go in for the next day's sessions. Now, at the end of those 3 days, people came away with so much best practice, knowledge, insight. They would know what worked, what didn't work. There was just so much there. Okay, so the convention today is fantastic. Let me read you what it says in the brochure. With a diverse online programme compiled by your fundraising peers, featuring case studies on fundraising successes and failures, innovative campaigns, inspirational speakers and practical tips. And that's fabulous.
Nothing wrong with that.
But where do people get all that stuff we created at the convention originally? Where do people get
it's all
best practice?
Out of date, Giles. We don't want that old rubbish now.
Is that it? Is that now the received wisdom? We don't want that rubbish now. It doesn't matter, 10 years ago we would have split test this pack and that pack, and we'd have looked at the results and rolled up. No, that's old hat now. We have an opinion. We think we're right. It's a good opinion. So we're going to go with our gut instinct, not with the proven results.
It can be the case. You've got to assess what people want, from their jobs. That if your focus is, how do we optimise income, not just for the period I'm at the organisation, but how do we optimise income 10, 20, 30 years hence, which is what I think we should be doing as fundraisers. We're looking after the charity really for the next generation, and then we're handing it on to somebody else. And if we care about the issues, I think that's a good focus to have. But if you want to do something different, or if you want to work in a different way, then what is the point of looking back to see what's worked, what's best practice, what are the basics, what are the fundamentals that we have to adhere to if you want to do something different? And often that is the case. I firmly believe that fundraising from I'm very much coming from an individual's perspective. That fundraising is it's habitual. We have to ritualize giving. And we tend to fit the one of my standard things I always go out on is that we have 3 long-standing Christian rituals that we work around. We have Harvest Festival, we have Christmas, and we have Easter / Lent, and all of those are times of giving, of sharing. And we look at our mailing program, and that's what we do: an Easter appeal, autumn appeal, winter appeal, and that's what we do. And we're perhaps learning more now. From different religions. We've got Islam, with Ramadan, and everyone is excited about Ramadan. And I have lots of conversations about, what can we do to get our hands on zakat? And that, number one, is the absolute wrong thing, the absolute wrong starting point. How do we get that? The question is what service do you fulfil for the Muslim community? Is your starting point? If you understand anything about zakat, it is 100% has to be given, and it has to be given to Muslims. Otherwise it's sadaqah, which is a different type of giving. But again, it's a ritualized form of giving. So we have all of these ritualized forms of giving, but when so often when you're looking at what's innovative, is it building on those rituals? Is it creating new rituals? Or is it really focusing on these times of the years and these cultural, that are sort of like reset points that we have throughout the year? We've got the, getting ready for winter. We've just got over the winter solstice. The summer's just about to start. We've got all of these important points, and we can go back to the days of Troy's Cathedral, and we will find those same models. And are we crazy to think that one person in one small charity can completely disrupt that? Or should we be really going back and focusing on saying, this is how fundraising works? What are the tweaks? What are the 1% that we can develop, rather than let's chuck everything out and start afresh?
So go back to your point about religious festivals.
Mm-hmm.
If you were starting now, today, to raise money in a particular community around a religious fundraising, around a religious festival, and you talk about the rituals, isn't the first thing you do is to go backwards and look at the history of the rituals,
mm-hmm.
and to look at how people in the past have engaged people to give those donations that
mm-hmm.
their faith requires them to give, and how have people done that?
Mm-hmm.
And then once you've learnt that, then you can say, okay, so now how do I apply that knowledge to the new circumstances, the new tomorrow, to apply technology, to apply all the things that are new. But don't you have to look backwards first? And just there's two quotes.
We're not blank pieces of paper.
Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it.
Absolutely.
Was George Santayana, and it's not one that occurred to me as I was thinking, which is Churchill, I think said, the further back into the past you look, the further into the future you can see.
Oh yeah.
And it's there's this sense in history that you should learn from the past,
mm.
and it just feels to me, and you're saying it, that has stopped. Somehow that at maybe 1999, we entered a new century. Everything that had gone before was now rubbish. We now needed to start a new future without any reference to history. You talked about the guard book, and agencies keeping the guard book for how many years? How many years would they keep that guard book for? 10 years? Would they be able to look back 10 years ago at the appeals that they sent 10 years ago and look at the results of those appeals and try and why did those appeals get those results in that time? Does anyone look at the guard books 10 years back?
I doubt it. I am, as you know, a self-confessed geek. I have a Pinterest board, and it's called Old Charity Ads. And one of the things that I do is I trawl through newspaper archives, and I search for old charity ads. And I've got charity ads going back to, I don't know what the earliest one that I found is, it would probably be, I don't know, early, maybe the 17th century or something along those lines. So very, very early. But the vast majority at the end of the 19th, early 20th century. And you can look at headlines from those ads, and they'd work today. I've got a cancer ad from, I think it was about 1928, and the headline is "Science Will Conquer Cancer," and that's not a million miles away from what Cruck is saying today, and that's the best part of 100 years ago. And it's the same with other charities. Will you be Father Christmas to this little boy? And we were in NSPCC last week speaking to Sir Peter Wanless, and he was talking about their Letter from Santa, campaign. That's a very, as he pointed out, that's a very transactional campaign, rather than what we would see as a core fundraising campaign. But it's still offering, that person the chance to be Santa and bring Christmas alive for a child. And if anyone does want to look at that Pinterest board, just search old charity ads on Pinterest.
So basically, what you're saying is that the way that those ads appealed to the reader has not changed. That they
The
would,
core message.
the core message.
And the visuals probably, yeah.
Okay, the core message and the visuals, they haven't changed. Donors' motivations haven't changed.
No.
People's attitudes to philanthropy haven't changed.
No.
What has changed is technology. So now your core message and your visuals would have to be made relevant to the internet, the websites, etc., etc. But it's still the same core message. And I think what you're saying is they should probably be the same visuals.
Yeah.
But they're not. Blooming heck.
It's the same with digital today. You know, digital is not a new media anymore. You know, how long have we been doing digital fundraising? 30 years now. What are we, getting on for that? But again, look at simple display advertising. If it's Facebook or if it's Instagram, so much of it is that arresting image, eye contact, celebrities. You can find loads of old celebrity ads, but a celebrity making the ask, because the celebrity, the line is stop the scroll. You're scrolling through and, oh, who's that? I recognise that person. I'll listen to that message. And obviously there's a little bit of peer-to-peer. We all know about the power of influencers. But again, it's still that arresting image and that strong CTA. Will you do X for Y? There's no difference there. And again, we know. I think one of the worst things about digital media is, on one level you can say it's super cheap. It doesn't cost you much to send an email, so you can chuck them out. But they're not personal. That's one of the things that people look at. How often do you get HTML emails now, a designed email? In terms of ad testing, what works? Just plain text. Plain text, drop a photo in, drop something else in. It's real, or it's authentic. It's as close as you can get to a letter. I put a piece on LinkedIn, which I think you liked yesterday. I'd collected all my election messages, and I just basically spread them out. Which one would you most like to? Which would you pick up? A lot of people like the Communist Party with the hammer and sickle on the front, but outside of that, it was the letter from Keir Starmer, and how many hundreds of years, have we had letters for? And it always starts out, the person that I'm addressing this to, and inside that, depending how you're breaking it down, but you've got the issue, their particular role, which will bring about what solution, and then at the bottom, a call to action, and then it's coming from me. That works. That works. Whereas these designed leaflets,
I can't tell you the full story yet, but having been strategically responsible for individual giving, I've never been able to get involved directly in a pack. And a client allowed me and paid me to get involved in creating a pack. And I did that, and we're just getting the results through. And the pack basically is simply a letter with nothing on it, no visuals. It's a letter from a beneficiary. And basically it's all a letter. There's some hand underlining done.
You should come and work for me, Giles.
A couple of bowls on nice thick paper, and it just looks like a letter. And a handwritten PS that's all a skew whiff, so it's not done using a format. Apparently, it's been incredibly successful. Okay. And it would be. It's a letter. It says, dear Mr. So-and-so, and then just goes on, yours sincerely. And it's like a 6-page letter, nice and clean, quite long paragraphs, not these really short things, not busy at all. Why aren't people sending real letters anymore? What they're sending is junk mail, and I'm a mystery shopper to 30 charities.
31 now, after you signed up to Sense.
I know, and MSF. And, most of them, they're just copycats of each other. And the thing about emails as well is because they're so cheap, people give very little attention to them. in terms of creating them. So I get loads of emails from charities. And it looks as if somebody quite junior just typed out something on their PC and sent it off. So it may be cheap to produce, but it's still expensive of my time to have to read it.
Oh yeah.
So I actually expect, it may be cheap to produce, but you should just spend just as much time on that email as you would if you were writing a handwritten letter. It should feel authentic. It should feel as if it's addressed to you.
And at every single point in that letter or email, why is somebody going to read the next paragraph, and why is somebody going to respond? Two things I would suggest to improve your letter for your client. Number one, you've got to consider the long-term relationship. So I always favour somebody at the organisation rather than a beneficiary. We've done beneficiary mailing, sometimes absolutely brilliant, but I always shy towards, I want this person to become a friend, and I work that way. And the other thing, stock. Cheap stock can beat expensive stock. So if you're brave enough, Giles, get some 80 GSM and do it on that, and it'll be show through, and it'll make the brand team go up the wall.
Next time we repeat it, we'll test cheap stock HGSM against
80 GSM,
yeah.
Do one other thing for me as well. Put a post-it. Put your CTA on a post-it. Your call to action on a post-it, and thank me later, Giles. Thank me later.
I'll test both of those things. Okay, are we agreed? I think we are. That the emphasis has moved from knowledge, experience, insight, best practice to innovation, the next new thing, the buzzword.
Not entirely, and I think I think we should emphasise that so often we're talking in generalisations, and and there is some great stuff out there. You've got organisations. Everyone knows my favourites. Even the ones that I don't work on. Salvation Army, love their work. Love what Crisis do. MSF. There are so many great organisations out there that are doing brilliant work. But one of the things I find, and it's just making this point, that what excites, I suppose, the sector, what gets people clicking, what gets people engaging, are those exciting new ideas, the shiny balls that really can take your attention away. And we'll often have, like, some organisations will just have innovation departments. And if you're paid to innovate, you innovate. But how often do they really come up with something that's fantastic? I don't really know of anything that's been absolutely brilliant that we've seen over the last few years that we couldn't have learnt about from going back in time, 40, 50 years. Charity Water did the birthday Facebook fundraisers, and they're very popular now. But go back in time, and you can see that I've got examples of that happening in the 1930s, where celebrities were basically saying, "Oh, give money to," was it the 50s, March of Dimes and things of that nature in the US. I think Jerry Lewis or someone did something along those lines, and so. There's little out there that is brand new, but sometimes when you get these brand new inventions, and things like lead generation, for example, value exchange or engagement products, there are so many awful disasters out there where people have spent many tens of thousands of pounds on these ideas because the early results look really exciting. Oh, we've got 60,000 people we've signed up to this lead gen product. And it's only when you go back to them a couple of years later that you say, well, how many of those did you sign up? Well, 18. 18,000?
Yeah. No, 18.
18. And that's the problem. And when we were speaking to Sir Peter, last week, he was talking about, one of their examples of, of that engagement product where it was videos where you could go on and you could learn about, the signs that, a child might be in trouble. And again, that's great information to get out there, but the people who'd engaged on that hadn't converted to give.
Yeah.
And it's that transactional thing that comes out of that piece of research that we keep discussing. You know, and at some point, you know, the CIOF have put their name to that, and you know, I'm not sure if that's a wise move at this position. But if anyone's done an engagement product or a value exchange product or something like that that's really, really, you know, really worked, let us know. Get in touch. Put it in the comments. Look at that, a YouTuber.
Okay, thanks, Mark. But let me put you back to your starting point. I believe, and I think we've agreed, that knowledge, experience, insight, success, these are good qualities. And in many cases, not all, but in many cases, they've been abandoned in favour of new, innovative ideas, whiz-bang, what do you call them, shiny balls that have no basis in fact. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, and I think if it's based in evidence, you know, if it's built on the back of what we know works or what we know what people want to do, brilliant. But there's so many of these ideas out there that it's almost like, oh, I wish they'd work. You know, it's one of the things we do at Blue Frog. We've got this manifesto, and we say when it comes to innovation, it's why will it work rather than why not give it a go. You know, this is the point that, oh yeah, we'll learn by failing. Sometimes you don't need to learn by failing. Sometimes you can learn by thinking and reading and researching. And I think that's important.
You're moving forward. I want to move backward. You're making a case against innovation for innovation's sake.
Yeah, probably, yeah.
You're arguing that innovation, without there being a firm background to it, it is actually counterproductive. And what I want to get to is where do we get to getting people to look backwards, to look at what worked in the past, to look at knowledge, to look at insight. How do we do that? Not how do we stop the innovation, that innovation is great. How do we encourage the sharing of previous best practice? How do we get people to look at what worked 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and how it might look now? And that's the first, and then I've got a subsidiary question.
Yeah, I think it's tough, really. Obviously, you know, I'm quite known for, you know, rattling on about history, and a lot of my blog posts are history. You know, one of my favourite pieces is, you know, the piece of Oxfam research that I got from the Bowdoin Library from 1973, and it says what are the most pressing problems for donors at the moment. You know, why are people going to give? Why aren't they going to give? And it says, oh, the economy is, you know, we're under pressure in the economy. You know, our finances are being squeezed. Too many charities asking for money at the same time. All of the same issues that we deal with today. And that was from the 1970s. What's that, 50 years ago? It's exactly the same. So in terms of how we can get that interest, I'm not sure. There's a number of geeks out there who love it, and I think they do very well as a result. But you know, I'm not sure. The fact it's got history, you know, as a prefix or a suffix, I don't know if it makes it exciting enough for the general fundraiser, but I might be wrong.
Okay. Why do we want to make fundraising exciting? Why shouldn't fundraising be boring? Why shouldn't it be really, really, really boring? Why shouldn't we look back at what worked 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and look at how we can make it relevant to today? Why do we have to be innovating? Why can't we be boring and look at what works? Look at results. Results are boring. Data is boring. Creative is great fun. You know, we can all do creative. Data and an analyst looking at A/B tests, that's boring. Let's be boring.
100%, Giles. I think 100% agree. You know, one of the things that I'm often thinking, I've got half an eye on what clients want to do. So often I'm thinking, okay, I know we can apply this. I know this is going to work. But it's almost like we have to fluff it up and polish it and just make it look different, make it look fun. And you know, I remember being asked at a conference, what could we do to make fundraising better? And my answer to Heather, her name was, she was at Imperial, college, and my answer was, there are two audiences when you're an agency. There's the client and there's the donor. And the more I can focus on the needs of the donor, the better I'll be. The more I have to focus on your needs as a client, the tougher it is. Because then I'm having to second guess what you want to see. Whereas if it's the donor, it's so much easier. And it's that halfway house that might be, the best you can get.
Okay, I'm going to take you back a bit. I'm afraid I'm going to push you back to how we share best practice. So we've agreed we should be looking backwards.
Yes.
We believe we should be learning from the past. We
Yes.
believe we should be looking at experience and insight and wisdom. Who is responsible for that? Because it's not the poor individual fundraiser that they're doing their best, but they're not responsible for sharing best practice. The Chartered Institute has moved in a different direction. It's now looking at smaller charities, local, etc. Who is responsible for getting the very best practice in individual giving, corporate fundraising, trust fundraising, major fundraising? Who is responsible for collating that, curating it was your word, and actually getting it out there, saying this is not just my idea, this is the best practice in the sector? Who's responsible?
One would hope it would be the institute, or it would be the Resource Alliance, the IFC maybe, but I don't think it is the case. That often that they're chasing after the shiny balls as well because they want to get bums on seats. We've got fundraising everywhere out there where their presentations, and they're looking at lots of different areas of work, and they have a massive library of videos of lots of sector experts and specialists presenting. So there's going to be some great stuff there. But the problem you've got is, how do you tell the difference? How do you tell the difference between what's a rubbish idea and what's a great idea? Going back to this point, curation. What you did earlier on is you curated, and you curated with a focus. The focus was, how can we disseminate information? Not how can we sell most tickets, or we can get most people to sign up to an online experience. And I think that's the distinction. It's this point. What do I want to do? Do I want to attract and excite customers, fundraisers being customers of the IOF, or do I want to disseminate the best information out there? And I think there's a clash in terms of what you do that. So there's so many amateurs like me in terms of the stuff that I write and I share. Like, it shocks people, the stuff I share. When we were talking with Sir Peter last week, he watched our first video, and he said, I hadn't perceived that was how the market had moved. That where all the money was much more focused on older people, and that's the head of one of the big UK charities. And if this stuff isn't being shared, then we have a problem. And maybe the IOF does need to get back to looking at that, at those fundamentals. But one more point. But it doesn't matter if they did that if no one wants to watch those videos or attend those sessions. That's the problem.
So how do you tackle that problem?
Well, you have to have great speakers like me and you, Giles, to present.
But first of all, who is it? Okay, the Chartered Institute, as I've said, has moved and doing a fantastic job now, but it's the majority of its members are from smaller charities. They're local hospices, etc. They're not the big national charities. They are not now the members of the CIOF. So the CIOF is no longer, in a sense, the sector body for all fundraisers. It's the sector body for a certain...
Is this true? Are the Crux and the Save the Children's and the Oxfams, no longer sending their teams to those conferences?
If you have a look at,
are they still members?
You have a look at the convention programme for this year's convention, and you find me a single speaker from one of the top 10 charities on any of the sessions.
Really? I haven't looked. I'm not.
That's not where they focus. Where they focus is fantastic. where fundraising everywhere work. It's fantastic. Director of Social Change. There are loads of organisations doing great work, but there is no one organisation that's kind of responsible for saying, okay, what is the best practice we need to share and how do we share it?
Yeah.
And I have a feeling, so you said you want a bit of controversy. The people who were members of the Institute of Fundraising years ago but now aren't, where's that money going? The people who came to the convention when it was £3,000 a time, where are they spending that money? And I think we're getting fundraising on the cheap. And I got into trouble last time we did a session because I suggested we should spend £100 million on doing. Okay. I won't make that a mistake. But I think we should be spending some serious money. The sector should be spending some serious money, thinking about how do we share best practice. And I think I know most of the appeal trips of the top 10 charities, and I only thought about this last night. It's not them individually I would criticise, but I would ask them, why don't you come together and ask the question, where do people go? What can we do as appeal reps of the largest charities to get best practice shared? And I'm sure that if you ask the people I know, they would say, let's do it. But we're not doing it. Somehow, there's a void, there's a vacuum.
For us, one of the things that we do at Blue Frog and we share amongst our clients and we share about amongst the staff is so much of it is based on research. We do tons of qualitative research, speaking to donors, but then we share the results of what we've done. Where we get permission, we share results from one client to another client and say, look, we tested this, this was the impact, how about giving it a go? And stuff like that works. We worked with Marie Curie for many years. And when we started working with Alzheimer's Society, they had a flower, the forget-me-not. And we all know about the Marie Curie daffodil, but Alzheimer's hadn't really developed that as an emblem or as such, and it's now. I think it raised more than Christmas last year as an appeal, and that came from nowhere. I think over the course of 2 or 3 years we developed that. So there are some great ideas, but often people won't see that. We did a similar thing with UNHCR. We developed the Stand with Refugees ribbon, a little blue ribbon that you can wear to demonstrate, that you believe that, refugees shouldn't be, forced onto small boats, and we do have to have a more humane approach to how refugees are treated and accepted by countries, and again, absolutely flew off the shelves. As ideas, but these are very, very simple ideas. But they're not that exciting. They're go back to the flag days from the First World War. And one of the first flag days that actually happened was for Belgian refugees in the First World War. So that there's a direct link between all these ideas, 100 or so years apart. But yeah, it's and you and I, one of the reasons why we're doing this, I share stuff on LinkedIn, I share stuff on my blogs, I write articles for newsletters, and none of this stuff we get paid for. It's all about let's try and get that information out there, but I don't ever feel the sense that I'm getting much help, or I've got I'm getting people pushing our stuff out. Howard, for example, is good. Howard Lake is great. UK fundraising is great for helping push that stuff out. F&P magazine in Australia. And I'd always recommend F&P. You can subscribe to F&P from the UK, and there's great articles in there. I think it's one of the best magazines globally to look at. But yeah, I don't feel I get any help from the CIOF.
Okay, so you mentioned two places. One is AMP, which is F&P. Australia?
Australia, yeah.
And the other is Howard Lake.
Yeah.
Now, I'm on Howard's greatest fans. I think he's doing fantastic work. But I'm glad you mentioned him. I hadn't thought of it. He's almost, well, he can be almost unique. He's pretty much unique.
A national treasure.
A national treasure, because he's actually not doing it for commercial purposes. He's doing it because he really believes in the sector, and he's pushing out the best practice. Yeah. I hadn't thought it. He's the one person that's probably really doing it. But it's like you said, not getting much help. You're not getting much help if it's only Howard Lake. So take. You're working with a whole load of clients, charity clients. So you must be acquiring, as an agency, a huge amount of knowledge.
Oh, yeah.
You're like the bees. You've got knowledge from here. Then, how are charities tapping into that? Are charities knocking at your door and saying, Mark, you've worked with 8 other charities. What are the real insights you've got that we can use to help us? Are they knocking at your door doing that?
Yeah, it's a lot more than 8. I think our client list is about 35.
No, I should be.
But
have you got 38 people knocking at your door saying,
"No,
will you share?"
Yeah, you get. Ever since I've been doing the video sharing stuff, I've had many more conversations, and some will be literally, I need some advice and support. I can't remember the name of the organisation, but the National Coast Guard's Institute, the people who have the lookouts, and they, keep an eye out what's going on. They were in touch last week, and they just needed some direction on how to put together their first ever appeal. And so I gave them an hour of my time, told them X, Y, and Z, and they've gone off to apply that. But if it's a biggie coming to you, if it's a big organisation coming to you, it works in one of 2 ways. Either they say, we want to hear your research, and you share your research and that's it, and you never hear from them again. Alternatively, they and this is the best one, this is the problem we've got. That you've said something that resonates with us at the moment. And then at that point, then you do say, well, okay, we tackled it doing X or Y or Z, and this is what we could do for you. And that tends to be how you get your new business, as an agency. It will come from conversations that might be 1 or 2 years long before the work actually starts. It can take a very long time. But no, I do not have a constant group of people knocking on my door saying, here's money, solve this problem for me.
No, that's not quite the question I was asking.
I will try again.
So you've got 38 clients. Well, we have 138 clients.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So within Blue Frog, there's masses of insight being created from all of your charity clients.
Oh, yeah.
And you must be like distilling that and seeing what, etc. And what I want to know is you've got this fantastic store of knowledge. To what extent are people really tapping into it and saying, the place I really need to go for information about, average gift setter is Mark, because he's got 38 clients and he will give me the best advice based on his 38 clients.
Yeah, and
or is that not a?
It's not what people want. You see, one of the issues that you've got, you might be having a conversation with a client, and you can say, they say, we want to do X, and we can do the best Sergeant Wilson. Do you think that's wise, sir? And it irritates the hell out of people. It's like, our budget, this is what we want to do. That's how you lose clients, really. That you question these ideas, and I won't go into the circumstances, but you could be running a very, very successful program, and suddenly, for whatever reason, there's a change, and suddenly it's like, we don't want to do that anymore. And it's like, it's worked brilliantly for 10 years. Don't change it. Please don't change it. No, we're going to do a rebrand and do something else. And, absolute fear hits you then, because, you're not going to retain those people. You are going to lose them. And, and that's one of the biggest problems that we face at the moment in the sector. And track what happens. Look at their annual reports. I did a post on this the other day. Look at their annual reports. People list their Ageee income or their DM income. You can see it on the lines, and you see it's going down, down, and over 6-7 years, maybe 40% drop, 50% drop. What's happened there in a market which, the nadir for Ageee fundraising was, the terribly sad death of Olive Cook, but things have got better since then. The sector's raised more money. That 2015 was the absolute low point, and since then it's grown and grown and grown and grown. We have got better, and so if your income is going down in this market, that's a big question. Why? What do you need to do different? And maybe one of the things that you need to do different is stop doing different, and start focusing on, what it is about you and your cause that matters. And it is that focus that I think that we can sometimes lose.
The thing we need to do different is to stop doing things different.
Yes.
Love it. I'll put that on my wall.
I'll get a job in advertising one day.
Okay, are we getting near to closing time?
Yeah, pretty much. We're about 5 minutes off the hour, but
End on a high note.
End on a high note.
So, the thing to do differently is to stop doing things differently. Do things as they were done best before.
And if you disagree with that, why don't you tell us what a silly old pair of sods we
Absolutely.
are? But share the evidence. Say, we did this and it was absolutely brilliant, and 5 years ago, and our income has rocketed, because we know there's new stuff out there. But we need the evidence. That's the key point. So if you can, share. And if you share, you're not going to just help us know the ways of your righteousness. You're going to help everyone else in the sector as well. So please share that information. Maybe you might even like to come and be a guest on one of our sofas, and we can together make the sector so much better. But anyway, that's it from me. I've been Mark Phillips. Thanks very much for watching.
I still am Giles Pegram, and thank you for watching.
Happy fundraising.